Hey guys, welcome in and welcome back to my channel. I am so happy to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about redoing the accent wall in my husband's office to give him the perfect Zoom background. One thing that is really important to me and my husband is appearing really professionally online, both in our videos, on Zoom calls, on all that. It was important for us to give him a nice accent wall in his office so that he could take meetings with confidence. So we went to Lowe's, we got some trim, some chair rail, and a couple paint samples. As you can see, we have a little bit of a blank canvas. We had installed hardwood floors already into our house. That's where we were at, and we wanted to add a little bit of pizzazz to the wall while keeping it elegant, professional, and cohesive with the rest of the house. Now, like any other projects that I've done before, I often mock things up in Figma or SketchUp. Essentially, I just drew the wall panel on Figma and I played around with different dimensions to see what trim would look good. I even sketched out where the outlets would be to make sure the trim would go around that perfectly, and it worked out really nicely. So we got some chair rail, we cut it to length, we put it up to the wall, and Chris installed it just with a hammer and a chisel. Later on, we did use a nail gun from a friend, but this way worked well. It did take a little bit longer, but you know, it worked and it looks absolutely great. You would never know the difference. We also wanted to test out a couple of different paint colors. Now, we didn't know if we wanted it to be a more beige, a more blue, a more green. We wanted it cohesive with the rest of the house, like I said previously. So we tested out a couple samples, and spoiler alert, even though here's a few photos of them in different lights, we actually ended up going with a lighter version than one of the green colors because we saw that once we started painting it more and more, it got darker as it dried, and we still wanted it to be light and airy like the rest of our house. While we let the samples dry to get a feel for them, we moved on to the trim pieces. So this was really just a process of measuring meticulously multiple times, cutting mitered edges, and then putting the trim on the wall. Firstly, you need to miter the edges at a 45-degree angle to kind of make a little bit of a picture frame. If you're going to use a trim, you want one that is beautiful on the inside and the outside. And what I mean by that is you want it to seamlessly connect to the wall behind it and in front of it so that it would seamlessly blend into the wall on both sides. Before we nailed everything up, we did tape it to the wall first just to get a sense if we liked the shape, if we thought it was in a good spot. One great hack that Chris did was he took a piece of plywood, a scrap piece, and he cut it down to size to make a little bit of a measuring block. So instead of having to get the tape measure out between every single piece of trim, we could use the block in between each frame and make sure they were identical in distance from each other. That saved time, that saved energy, and it was a lot more fun that way. Here's a funny photo with some of the trim taped up there and two of the boxes taped in, and we just did that to get a feel for it, to say, hey, do we like this? Is it gonna be too cluttered? Is it gonna be too much or too little? And we really liked it, so we decided to keep going. One thing that scared me a little bit about this project was using the nail gun, so much so that Chris volunteered to be the one to use it, and I was very okay with that. It made a ton of noise. It was very, very powerful, so it kind of freaked me out, but there are ways to do it safely, so just know that. Maybe have a friend teach you how to use it if you don't know how, or a professional. Don't get machinery you don't know how to use. You don't want to hurt yourself. Chris was willing to use the nail gun, and so he got the job done perfectly. He even had a friend teach him how to use it ahead of time so that we could be safe, so that was a huge blessing. It's really satisfying to watch all the pieces of trim go up on the wall to create these beautiful panels. It is crazy how much a little bit of trim goes such a long way. A lot of times people might get nervous putting trim or paneling or board and batten or something like that that's an accent piece on a wall with some more texture. In other words, on a wall that isn't flat, and we were nervous about it too. Fortunately, we went online, we went on Pinterest to see if other people had done it, and we found a cool reference photo that really showed it done well. So we felt comfortable to do that too, and I think it looks fantastic. Now, this is the part that separates a real DIY from something that looks a little bit more professional, and that's getting the little finishing touches in. So we took some caulk and we went around every single seam of the chair rail, of the paneling. We even went into the corners of the trim to make sure there was no gaps there. We went over every single little nail head with a little bit of caulk and a little bit of sand to make sure that it was all perfectly smooth, that everything was hidden, and that it was prepped for painting. If you've watched my videos before, you know I am a very big advocate for painting with painter's tape to help you make very crisp lines. Yes, it takes a ton of time setting up, But yes, it creates great finishes and it reduces mess, which means it reduces the likelihood of ruining something else in your house, and no one has time to fix more messes. That's all I have to say. It might not look like a whole lot is going on in this clip, but there is. We decided to paint the entirety of the bottom portion of the wall as well as the chair rail and the trim with a completely plain, blank, matte white color. I know it's such a subtle thing, but when things look clean and intentional, they just brighten your life. They make you feel more peaceful. I don't know, it has this effect on me. Let me know in the comments of if that has the same effect on you. Does having an organized and clean and refreshed space actually affect your psychological or mental health? Because it absolutely does for me. Next, it was time to paint the upper portion above the chair rail with our decided paint. Now, like I said, we went with a little bit of a lighter, more muted green. I would describe this color as the kind of marriage of a nice light green and a beige. So it still goes with the natural open, airy feel with our house, but it does add a little bit of personality and it completely elevates the space in the end. Another great part about just doing an accent wall was this was such a small amount of space to paint, considering that the bottom half was a different color, that I believe we only needed a sample or two of that paint color. We didn't need to buy a large amount of paint, and because it was an inside paint, we didn't get the highest grade of paint either. We just got exactly what we needed. We painted it on and we did some touch-ups afterwards. I don't even think we needed to do a second coat, and part of that is because our base color was white, so we weren't coloring over something dark, but it made a huge difference and it was a very, very cost-effective way to add a little bit of personality to the space.
This one is the one I'm most concerned about because of the fact that we did it when it's kind of wet.
I'm not concerned about it. As per usual, taking the tape off the wall and seeing that crisp, fine line was, of course, one of the most satisfying parts of this project. You can also see that we completely have our bookshelf just pulled off against the wall. And that's another thing about an accent wall is you don't need to remove all the furniture from your room. You don't need to tarp every single thing off. 3, 2, 1. This was a huge win and I absolutely loved it. And so when we got to finally take the tape off at the end, we knew it was going to be beautiful, and yet it still outshined my expectations. After we were done taking up all the tape and admiring it, we let it dry and everything finished overnight. And the next day we took a photo and you could see there's a little piece of tape there, and that was just kind of to tell us we had one little touch up to do. But other than that, the room was looking fantastic, and I am so excited to show you the final reveal of Chris's accent wall. It elevated the room in a way that worked with the rest of the home, that added a great zoom background, but it was a great canvas for Chris to display his personality and the things that he loves. It was elevated, it was beautiful, but it was still his, and it could still be his style, and I think it looks fantastic. You can see that the wall goes really well with the rest of the office, even though it's different than the other walls. You can also see, if you're a real internet sleuth, that might be a background you recognize, and that is because my husband is also a YouTuber, a much bigger YouTuber than I am, of course. He's fantastic. And so if you're curious about his channel, he reviews things like tech and productivity and finance and all that good stuff. And so I will link his channel in the description below. Do check it out. He is awesome. Well, guys, that was another successful project on a complete budget. With a couple $100, some sweat equity, and some power tools borrowed from friends, we made a huge impact on his office, and I think it looks fantastic. I'd love to know your thoughts. Would you do it differently? Would you do it the same? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, if you could give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, that allows me to keep making videos for you guys just like this, which I love to do. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now.